how to survive breaking up. Oh boy, I'm sure we've all been there, and we have a lot to say. And Susan's going to share with us tonight about how to get through this difficult time, or not so difficult, depending. So last week, I know that we focused on fall out of love because people actually do decide to move on before the new year. Others discover the horror and grief that their partner is moving on. Breaking up with someone can be dangerous or even deadly, and you need to learn to do this safely. A key questions about this for Susan. Okay, so this actually means being kind to your partner as you do indeed disconnect to avoid watching your back every minute of the day. And so Susan Allan will indeed show us exactly how this can work for you, and so you can have that peaceful and safe breakup. Now I'm going to tell you a little about Susan. She has created Heartspace Solutions, and she is usually here teaching us how to create the most loving and intimate connections when you break up. You need to connect before you disconnect. So you just really can't go missing in action. You've heard Susan speak about surviving a life-threatening divorce, and she will also speak about how she has helped so many clients and relationships with peace and kindness, so that now they do indeed have the lives that they desire. And the gift that Susan has to offer is a complimentary 1-hour private telephone session so that everyone has the availability to transform their lives, their relationships, and their future. And I love this. Susan Allan says if you do 100% of what works and 0% of what doesn't, you can have the life that you have always dreamed about. Oh my, Susan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks.
I can't wait to get started. We have a lot of questions and advice from Susan that will really be helpful for all of our viewers, myself included. So along this journey, Susan, my first question to you would, what does someone's expectations have to do with breaking up safely?
You know, if you're in a relationship, you have certain we would call them needs. If you are using a nonviolent communication vocabulary, as Gigi and I do, and most of you who watch do as well. So expectations are needs. If you have needs and they're not met, and you get to the point where you feel hopeless that they could never be met, you're going to want to break up. The smart move, if your needs are never going to be met, or many of your needs are not ever going to be met, is to break up. However, you have to do it peacefully. You have to do it safely. That's why tonight's show is so important. It isn't a question of whether you're ever going to end a relationship. Most of us have ended a number of them, and if we live long enough, we will perhaps end at least one more. I hope not, right? But in any case, be clear about this. Getting your needs met is crucial, but what if your partner's needs are being met in the relationship with you? And now they're going to feel as if you're taking the tablecloth and pulling it out, and all those dishes and glasses and the knives are going like this. So be very careful. That's why we're doing this show tonight.
And keep that knife on the table.
And your hand away from it.
Now, what is the secret, Susan, to breaking up and really having it be safe and peaceful?
You have to understand before you go to this conversation or this meeting, you have to understand what your partner's needs have been. Needs that have been met in the relationship, needs that have not been met. You have to really do an efficient job of analyzing this. And you have to be prepared. You know, I'm always writing scripts for clients, and I'm always writing scripts on the air. When Gigi says, well, can you demonstrate something? So then I'll create a script right, in that moment. This is that kind of a situation. As you'll see later in the questions, how do you motivate and inspire a partner to let you go is a script. How do you create the script you realize which of your needs were not met and which were met, which of your partner's needs were met and which weren't met, and then you come up with a 6-part conversation to explain it, and you know my favorite expression, motivate and inspire them.
Beautifully put. Now, what happens when you actually tell somebody that you're breaking up because you aren't happy instead of putting the focus on their happiness?
Well, my friend Scott gave me some statistics from the FBI that ought to, turn everybody's hair white in the next 5 seconds. 24.8% of all people murdered, and this is from 2011, were slain by their family members. These are real figures. If you make it about you, I want this, I don't want that, I need this, I don't need that, you didn't do this, you did that, blame, 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 I am really alarmed to think of what can happen, because these 24.8% of all the people who were killed, by family members, we know who these people are. It's not like we've never met any of these people. Because, as you know, if you've been watching Gigi's show for enough years, I was almost one of those statistics. I came very close to being a statistic myself. And I'm a peaceful person. I wasn't confrontational. I just didn't want to stay in the marriage for the rest of my life. And not being able to handle it over a long enough period of time, he went crazy. I didn't even get to the point of ever asking for a divorce. He was just very, very psychic, and he already sensed it. So be careful. I'm talking to the person watching who doesn't think I mean them. That's the person I want to be sure is really paying attention to this.
So I'm curious, Susan, would your friend say that crimes of passion are very real?
Prevalent. Very,
yes.
very prevalent.
Yeah.
Very prevalent.
Oh, gosh, okay.
But we know this, you and I.
Of course we
know
do.
this, we know this.
All right, well, let's explore this question. Let's say that somebody isn't going to be violent or dangerous. Is there any reason for them to be really concerned about a breakup?
Well, first of all, you don't know who you need to be concerned about in advance. You really don't. I mean, my former husband was beloved by many of his patients. It's nice and funny to say, oh, he was a clinical psychologist, they're all crazy. But the truth is that I didn't know it when I married him, and nobody stopped me from marrying him, so come on. And, the people that Gigi's had trouble with seemed like reasonable enough people. So you don't know. The reason to avoid the wrong kind of a termination of a relationship is anything from I don't want to be cruel, I don't want to hurt somebody that I used to care about, all the way to I don't want to die. So anywhere between these two poles, you've got a reason to be kind. But also it's karma. If you believe at all in universal karma, then you want to be very careful. Be very careful.
I believe in karma. I shall proceed with caution.
Exactly.
Now,
Good.
let's explore this. Why are you really convinced about karma and that being cruel to someone really can be dangerous?
And it isn't just cruelty. Though I did see my former fiance die, and we'd been broken up for many years, and then he was awful to the next woman and awful to the next woman, and he died alone, which is everybody's worst fear. And he died from 3 forms of cancer, which is should be everybody's worst fear. So to me, that was terrible and heartbreaking, but clearly there was a connect the dots at play. But my best friend, who was one of the sweetest people in the world, she was in like a 5 or 6 year lawsuit against her contractor who had done horrible things, really destroyed her 1800s home. But she stayed in this lawsuit even though everyone advised her that it would probably have negative health effects on her. And she died tragically also of 3 forms of cancer. So these are 2 kinds of breakups, right? Breaking up with somebody who's awful to you, well, and then he gets cancer karmically, if we believe in that, from all the stress and the tension. And she is wonderful and sweet and loving and kind and adorable, and she still has this horrible, horrible outcome. So the bottom line is avoid stress, because stress kills.
Absolutely. Okay, let's go to this question for you, Susan. How can we actually cope with a breakup when we really don't want to?
What I've been able to do since the 80s, since I learned this, is to understand that what he calls love is not what I call love. And I've taught this to so many people in all these years, in all these decades, that what you call love isn't what she calls love. Therefore, did you lose the love of your life? No. Did you lose the great, loving relationship you'd always dreamed of? No. Did you, in fact, perhaps even dodge a bullet in the sense that if this had gone on for 10 more years, or 20 more years, or 30 or more years, or for the rest of your life, you would have missed out on actual love? So think about it that way. I really encourage you to. And if you need me to help you with that, please get in touch.
What would you suggest now are the steps to a safe breakup?
Well, Fred's going to show us the 6-part conversation. And as many of you know, I developed the 6-part conversation for this kind of an opportunity to create a motivating, inspiring solution together, what we call co-creating a solution. If you just pull the tablecloth out and this other person is now frantic, desperate, hysterical, crying, reduced, to a box of Kleenex, you may end up paying. There is a possibility that you will end up paying. Even if you treat a deeply troubled person with kindness, you may end up paying, so you have to really master these skills. You have to master these skills. And as I said, I didn't even mention the divorce word. I just appeared to be disconnecting emotionally. That was all it took with somebody who was obviously quite troubled. So be very careful. Learn this. If you don't know how to do the 6-part, again, I can run you through it in a free 1-hour session. It would be my pleasure, because I want you to understand in your own life with your own partner what his or her needs are and how to motivate yourself out of there safely. And you motivate him or her by explaining that it's his or her needs that aren't met. And you can always do that because people are always complaining about something. So you just have to pay attention. Are they complaining that you're not neat enough? Are they complaining that you're not a good enough cook? Are they complaining that you spend too much money? Are they complaining that you're not considerate enough about their career? Are they complaining that you don't share the household chores or you don't share childcare? Whatever it is, make a mental note of what you've been hearing as a complaint, because that's what you need to do to motivate them to move on.
Oh, I like that. You really put that spin on it.
You have to.
Yeah, perfect. Take note to self. Now, what do we need to do if someone breaks up with us?
Well, I can tell you, thank you, Fred. I can tell you that the 7 stages of trauma are among the most valuable skills I ever developed and among the most valuable skills I've ever had to use. Thank you, Fred. And what's important about this is understanding that you're not going to go from panic to peace, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You're going to go in whatever order you personally experience. I'm working with somebody right now who I was hoping he could get to anger because he was in so much hopelessness and grief. I was hoping he could get to anger because he was in so much panic. And I know from my own experience that you have to be able to get through all the stages that apply. And I knew that underneath this particular man there was a lot of anger because he's my client, I know him. So panic is normally what happens when you hear the person telling you it's over. And you've got to figure out how to cope. You've got to figure out how to handle it. You just can't ignore it. Then you go through denial briefly, but you've got to go back to the 7 stages. Then you feel agonized. You're in so much grief. It's hard to get out of bed if that's the kind of mind you have where you go to sadness. But you've got to work through these stages. Bring them to bed with you, but for heaven's sakes, work through the stages. And then you go through the rest of them. And finally, when you hit epiphany, that's when you realize that the relationship actually didn't work for either of you. If somebody wants to break up with you, it's because the relationship wasn't working for either of you. And then you start to think of it from his or her point of view. So even if you're the one who's been given the breakup talk, even if you're on the receiving end, you will soon benefit by getting to the place where you see his needs weren't met, your needs weren't met. Her needs weren't met, your needs weren't met. When you can get to that place, you are just at epiphany, and that is golden.
That is the goal too, right? Now, can we create a mutual breakup if one person really, really, really wants to end it for whatever reason and the other does not?
And I am telling you, you have to. Look at the FBI statistics, 24.8%, right? They're murdered by family members. So I'm telling you, you have to. You don't have a choice. Don't become a statistic, and don't become an almost statistic like me, you know? I mean, I was on the Montel Williams show talking about how I was almost murdered. So please, you know, not a plan. So how do you do it? You make it all about him or her before you have the conversation. You connect to that other person's needs with empathy. You guys have been watching the show long enough. You know empathy is about the other person's needs. I can imagine, Barbara, that you've been complaining to me for such a long time because you really want a different lifestyle. You know, you're used to going on great vacations. Your former husband took you to wonderful places. And, you know, I have a career, and my career is very important to me. And we just don't have the lifestyle that's so important. And it's so much fun for you. And I might be able to offer that to you in 3, 4, 5 years, but I don't want you to be resentful and disappointed. I know this is important to you, and I know you deserve it. So that's one way of convincing somebody. And, you know, the greedy wheels are going to start to turn, and Barbara, whoever she is going to start seeing herself on the beach in Cabo. So that's a way to make it happen. Or a completely different thing. You know, I know, John, that financial security is really important to you, and you want a wife who earns as much as you do or almost as much. And I know that when we first married, you were hopeful that I would keep my career and that I would continue to be an attorney. And you were shocked to learn that, you know, the stress of being, you know, a labor attorney was just too much for me. I just couldn't handle it. And now I'm starting to feel beher. But, you know, John, I know you deserve a woman who can work and have a career, and I'm so sorry, it just isn't me. So whatever that partner's needs are, whatever the key needs are, you've heard about them for years, or for days, weeks, or months, and that's what you go with. And when John says, oh no, I really love you, well, I know you do, but I know that over time, this love is going to just turn into indifference, which is even worse than hate. Because I know the lifestyle you want. You've described it again and again, and you know, you would have had it if I'd been able to blah, blah, blah. So you don't let them convince you. You don't, because you've prepared the conversation. So please speak with me. Let me help you prepare the conversation.
Nice. Now, when do you even start to motivate someone to break up with you?
Well, in the very beginning, you're motivating them to see if there's a future. Because in the beginning of a relationship, you're passionately attracted to each other, or else why be together? Because if it's not sexual, then every other need can be met by a friend. But if you're passionately attracted to each other and you want to be together all the time, and you just can't wait for night to come so you can rip off your clothes and jump into bed, then you would think that that would not be the time to think about breaking up. Except guess what? In daylight, there are problems. In daylight, there are things about the relationship that don't work. And there could be a lot of them. And you keep trying to ignore it, and he keeps trying to ignore it, or she keeps trying to ignore it. But that's when you have to work on it. That's when you say, you know, Linda, I'm a little confused about you going on job interviews because, it seemed to me that you love your job right now. And you're going on job interviews at companies that are nonprofits that can't possibly pay you what you're earning, as a CPA or a dentist or whatever it is. And I'm just wondering how you see this in the future. But you have to give them enough permission to tell you the truth. If you go down heavy on the criticism, then you know that one of two things will happen. Either they'll lie to you because they don't want to fight, or they're going to start thinking about breaking up in a very serious way, which is perhaps what you want them to do. But if you want to hear the truth, you have to give permission people to tell you the truth. You have to let it sound as if you're totally open to whatever you get from them. And that's always the smartest move anyway, because wouldn't you like to have a little advance notice?
Absolutely. Now, where is the focus in the 6-part conversation?
Well, in this case, it's got to be in solution, but before that, it's got to be in empathy. So it's empathy. What is this listener's needs? I'm not speaking yet. I'm empathizing with them. So, Jane, I know that you were very disappointed after I gave you a birthday present this year, 2 weeks ago, and you haven't said a word about it. But my guess is that you were very disappointed because you hoped that I was going to be able to get you an engagement ring. And you hoped that we would be able to make plans for the future. And I know we've been together for 1.5 years. So do I understand your thoughts about it? And you have to totally be silent and open to hear the truth. You have to hear the truth. So many intelligent men will wait about 2 years, by the way, before they propose to you, as opposed to the 2 guys who proposed to me on my first date with them. Don't do that if you're a guy. That's basically nutty. So if you're serious about marrying somebody, the time to do it is after you really know them and you've really been together. And about 1.5 years, 2 years is a good amount of time. And then you can always be engaged for another year if you're still not sure. Better to be sure than not sure. But it's about empathy, empathy, empathy. What are the feelings and the needs of the listener? And then only after you finish all that, would you ask if they're willing to hear your thoughts about it.
Good information as usual, thank you. Now, when you speak about dictatorship or democracy in a relationship, how does that really affect breakups?
A lot of the issues in relationships have to do with the differential between the sexual part of the relationship and the friendship part of it. So, the line that, comes to mind is, saying to a guy, well, you can treat me that way sexually, but if you dare treat me that way, at a business dinner or at a dinner party, or even we're sitting around in the living room with friends, forget it. Because what's fun and playful sexually is a very different story from the respect and the mutuality, frankly, that most women expect in this day and age in the rest of the relationship. And a lot of men find this very confusing. Or they may treat you with the same kind of respect, in your sexual relationship, and you're thinking to yourself, this is boring, what do I want to be here for? So it's very important to assess what your partner's needs are, what I call taking the temperature of your relationship. Because if you're taking the temperature of it, then you know when your partner is pleased and you know when he is displeased, or when she is just often shocked, horrified, and is thinking, how fast can I get out of this relationship? This is not for me.
Conscientious, to say the very least. Now, but what if someone is really sure that they do want to stay with you? Could you give us an example of how to make it seem that the breakup is mutually satisfying?
That's when you really have to remember what they said to you. Somebody may want to stay with you because you're breaking up with them a week before Thanksgiving, which is not anything you want to do. Or, like one of my friends, was told that he had a certain amount of time for the breakup to occur, and the time was very, very short. you wouldn't want to do that. It's a question of really taking time. It's a question of really being compassionate, not pretending to be compassionate, not having that, stopwatch approach. I'm out of here. I'm done. I am so done. I don't even want to remember what your name is, because my needs are XYZ. I mean, I've been there. I have been the person who broke up with somebody, locked the door, and leaned against the door. Thank God that's over. I've been that person. And unfortunately, the pain and grief that guy experienced, this is like 40 years ago, was not worth it. Or the pain and grief that a boyfriend experienced when I was 15 and broke up with him. And he went back to prep school and he started drinking. And I had done such a great job of telling him basically that he was too good for me, But I was only 15. And, he went back to prep school. He drank. It was just a mess. It was just a mess. So do it slowly if you don't want to suffer.